Hey, this is Pastor Curry, pastor of the Zion Fair Baptist Church, Wilmington's most exciting church, the church that love ya and anything you can do about it. Today with Coffee with Curry, I have some exciting things that's going to happen because we're going to be talking with the executive director for the ACLU. Now, many of you may not know this organization, but many of you may know this organization because they have impacted many of our lives in many different ways. Sometimes they're fighting for you and you don't even know it because their whole quest is to make sure they bring fairness and equity to all mankind, not just to the African Americans or to the Latinos or to the minorities, but to all of those who are not being treated fairly. And I have the great pleasure of bringing in today the executive director, Brother Mike, and he's going to just talk to us about what goes on in the life of ACLU. And let me just be very honest with you. It's got to be a whole lot going on, given the fact that we have Donald Trump in office and he likes to make sure he's doing all kind of things up to keep things moving. But we're going to talk with him and we're going to see how and what's going on with his office and how it's impacting Delaware at large. Why don't you call somebody real quickly? Tell them Coffee with Curry is on and let's get after it.
Good morning, Delaware and surrounding areas. You are now tuned in to this week's Coffee with Curry. Join us every Sunday at 11 a.m. with new guests every week. So grab your cup of coffee and join us on Coffee with Curry.
And we're back. As I told you all, I'm so honored and I'm so privileged to have you. I know that you all are so very, very busy, but for you to take time just to be a part of this show, I am very grateful. Welcome to the Coffee with Curry show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Well, you know, Mike, as I was preparing for this time, because I'm just so happy to meet you, number one. You may not remember, and I'm not sure, but I was the chair for the board at Moyer Academy. Mm-hmm. We had run into some issues and you all helped to defend us. Mm-hmm. And we're grateful. I'm very, very close with Jay Street, who have spent a lot of time with you all, and you all have been there to champion many of the things that he got accomplished, especially in the educational realm. So before I even get started with any questions, I want to just say again, thank you for all the work that you all do. I don't know how often you get an opportunity to be thanked, but thank you for what you all do and how you keep your eyes on the things that are unfair to those individuals who deserve more.
I definitely appreciate that. And, you know, any friend of Jay Street, he's one of our truth speakers here in Delaware. And so anybody who's a friend of him is a friend of me.
Absolutely. Well, then we're going to be good friends then. One of the things I want to start off by talking about is what are some of the priorities that are going on with the ACLU for here in Delaware? We're going to keep it local first and then we'll go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I've been executive director of the ACLU of Delaware for 5 years now. Okay. And so we have really grown as an organization. When I first came in, we had 6 staff members. Right now we have 16
Oh,
staff.
wow.
So we have grown a lot. We have more attorneys. We have more folks advocating in the community, more folks doing our communications work. And so we've really been able to expand what we're able to work on. Okay. Right now, our main priorities are really 4 different issues. Okay. So we focus on criminal legal reform, so criminal justice, also education equity, voting rights, and then a 4th one is kind of snuck up, immigrants' rights. You know, that's one that we've been sort of building on, but especially with everything going on nationally and here in Delaware, that's been an issue that we've really seen a lot more work on over the last several months.
Yeah, and for those who are watching us, and I have a lot of seniors who watch, as well as regular age individuals, help me with the 4 you just shared. Could I get a little bit more information? Because when you talk about immigrants' rights, when you talk about voters' rights, why is it important to use those 4 tenets as your really stepping stones?
Yeah. So we selected all 4 of those because when we did our strategic planning work as an organization, you know, we reached out to members of the community, we talked to various coalition partners, and those were the issues that people identified for us as the issues of sort of greatest need. Some of them are issues that we've been working on for a long time. So I mentioned criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. That's actually something we've been working on for many, many years, but really has been marked by our campaign for smart justice, which we launched back in 2018. We launched that campaign saying that we wanted to reduce Delaware's prison population by 50%. We wanted to make that a goal because Delaware is actually one of the highest rate of incarceration on the eastern seaboard. And so we really felt like we could make a difference. Now, sitting here today from 2018, we've actually decreased the state prison population by 30%. So we've done some really amazing work, but we have a lot more to go. In fact, right now in the Delaware legislature, we're working for probation reform because that still tends to be an issue that keeps a lot of people tethered to the criminal justice system and becomes sort of a revolving door where people get a minor technical violation while they're on probation. You know, they miss a meeting with their probation officer or whatever, and they end up back in prison. And that doesn't benefit anybody. So we're looking at that. Also police reform in our criminal legal work. So those are all sort of continuations. With education equity, that's also been a high priority of ours for a long time. You mentioned Jay Street earlier. Obviously, Jay was a big part of our litigation that we brought several years ago, challenging Delaware's funding system. Because of that lawsuit and our partnership with the NAACP, we were able to get millions of more dollars into Delaware public schools, but the issues still have not gone away. We still need more funding into the public school system. And we have to address issues like discipline disparities, you know, where we see Black and brown kids, kids with disabilities, suspended and expelled a lot more frequently. On voting rights, that's a really, really important one for me. I've worked on that in my career at the ACLU for over 20 years. And unfortunately, here in Delaware, we are far behind the times.
Wow.
So if you look at voting rights here in the state of Delaware, we don't have the ability to vote by mail without an excuse. We don't have the ability to do same-day registration, which 23 states plus the District of Columbia allow for that to happen. We also are one of the few states outside of the Deep South that still has lifetime disenfranchisement for people with criminal violations. And so if you take all of those things together, Delaware is in the same category as two other states with all of their voting restrictions, Mississippi and Alabama.
The deepest red states.
The deepest red states with the longest history of racial discrimination. And so we know that we can do a lot better here in the state. And so we launched the Every Vote Counts campaign, which is a big campaign to get our Constitution modernized here in the state, to get rid of those felony disenfranchisement laws, to allow people to vote by mail, to allow them to do early in-person voting, and also to allow same-day registration, which would change the face of our voting population and allow a lot more people to be enfranchised in the state.
Yeah, and when I'm listening to you talk about the four, it appears that even on a national level, they are attacked. When you talk about the voter rights, for example, you would think that Delaware being as strong of a blue state as it is, that these things would not be an issue, but it still remains an issue.
Yeah, and it's interesting, especially on voting rights. Sometimes we see blue states actually lagging behind other states. I worked in Ohio for 15 years, and I worked on voting rights there for a long time. And before the last couple presidential elections, Ohio was a bellwether state. Now they're pretty solidly red, but they always used to be a swing state. And so a lot of the voting rights issues were litigated, were handled in the legislature. Because Delaware is such a small state with so few presidential electors up for grabs, and we're not usually in the national conversation, we've kind of been forgotten. And so we've lagged behind a lot of other places. And so we believe every election is important, right? If you think about with same-day registration, if we pass that here in Delaware, we could add 26,000 new voters to the voter rolls. Most of those people would be Black, brown, low income, and younger people. if we could add 26,000 new people to the voter rolls, imagine how school board elections would look, or local municipal elections, right? Those are really important in terms of getting the people's power infused into local government. And so that could change the face of a lot of state and local government here in the state of Delaware.
Yeah, and when you talked about the education disparities, that's another attack that's going on nationally.
Yes.
With him attempting, he didn't get a chance to do it, but attempting to close down the Department of Education. How is that really affecting your office and what you all are doing?
Yeah, so it has had a large effect. We're really lucky, with all of the things happening nationally, we have a really strong national network at the ACLU. So the ACLU of Delaware is one of 54 affiliates across the country. So we have an ACLU in every state, plus the District of Columbia, and then we have 3 in California, because California is really big.
Yeah.
But we really coordinate with one another. And so when there was the threat to close the Department of Education, our national office stepped in with some of our affiliates to file litigation to stop that. We also, I don't know if you saw, had the threat a few months ago where the federal government sent a letter out to every school across the country telling them that they have to disavow all of their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in order to get federal funding. We also filed litigation against that because we believe that that is a threat to racial justice, to talking about gender and sexuality, but also, should just be a basic free speech right? That if educators want to talk about some of these issues in school classrooms, that they should have academic freedom to do it. If schools want to work with, folks to bring together teachers based off of different affinity groups, they should have the right to do that. So really, really important work. Here in Delaware, we've seen where now all of these changes federally are leaving a lot of things with some question marks above them. So right now, the state is trying to assess whether or not they're going to change their school funding formula. And a lot of that is based off of the litigation that we did with NAACP a few years ago. Because there are all of these question marks about federal funding coming forward and whether or not we can rely on that for our public schools, that's really impacting the conversation about whether or not Delaware can change its formula and put more money into the public school system.
Now, when you say Delaware changing this formula, you mean the state funding as opposed to federal funding?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we have a pretty outdated model, one that's been around for decades and decades and decades, that almost everybody agrees doesn't really work all that well, but nobody has actually been able to agree on what the best alternative to that is. And so now that there's question marks around additional funding coming in, I think it's led some people to be afraid to make any changes to the system because they're not sure that that federal money is going to be there if we change the state formula.
Absolutely. Now, what do you find ACLU's frustration with the state senators and representatives? If you would just say, I know I'm careful about, because I think you do a great work and I don't think you all are afraid, but I'm hearing you talk and I'm hearing some of the ways we are so far behind as a state. We're just too far behind to be this small, this blue, or should I say this liberal of a state, to have so many conservative type values or policies. Where do you find your frustrations at with working with our politicians?
Yeah, so I think that that's a really good insight that you just had, in that talking with a lot of my colleagues around the country, but also my experience of coming from a state that was controlled by Republicans in the legislature. So, for most of my time in Ohio, I was having to play defense all the time. And so not really knowing a lot about Delaware, when I came 5 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. We're going to be able to get legislators to, jump in and do all of this really great work. And, a lot of the legislators really do care about these issues. But there is oftentimes a fear from our elected officials about moving too far out there, right? And this has come up multiple times. I was actually thinking a lot about police reform over the weekend because it was the anniversary of George Floyd. And, that was right when I came to Delaware. And at the time when there were the protests happening across Delaware, we had elected officials who came forward and said, okay, yes, we're all about police reform. We're going to move this forward. Delaware was far behind a lot of other states. So we have here in the state something that was known as the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. It was passed back in the 90s. That's where all the bad ideas came from, is the 1990s. But Leobor, here in Delaware, we had one of the most extreme in the country.
Absolutely.
We had where it requires that the police departments do not have to share any records about police misconduct with the public unless they decide to. So we have no right to file a Freedom of Information Act request to get body-worn camera footage, to get records of investigations or any sort of disciplinary issues. So that really undermines a lot of trust and accountability because we don't know what's going on. And then also the Leobor law had prevented us from having community oversight committees that could actually hold law enforcement officers accountable when they violated the law. And so, we worked for a couple of years to try and get this passed. We had Senator Tizzy Lockman, who sponsored the bill. It's a really great bill. And we ran into so much opposition in the legislature that it was going to be too aggressive, too difficult to do, that eventually the reform efforts fell apart. And, now 5 years later, we're looking at where police reform is in this country and in this state. And we're still far behind. We have a pending lawsuit right now here in Wilmington against the police department because they have a program called Operation Safe Streets. I don't know if you other folks are aware of it, but it's essentially a partnership between probation and the police department where they go through the community, mostly the Black and brown parts of the community. And the probation officer, anytime they interact with somebody who's on probation, they don't have to abide by the same Fourth Amendment protections. They don't have to have a warrant to search you. And so they go through and they search any car, any home, any location where a person on probation is, and they use that to racially profile the community, to get around those search and seizure protections. So we know these things are happening. We know that we don't have the laws in place in the state to provide accountability and transparency. We had all of this public outcry in 2020 and 2021 to get it changed, and we still didn't move it forward. And we see that, unfortunately, like time after time, is that many times the legislators will say the right things. They'll say, yes, I'm down with the cause. But when the rubber hits the road, we don't get the reforms passed.
Yeah, one of the people who I know, you may know him, Kobe Owens, he was very critical of several Black politicians as well as others who really talked one thing but voted another way, or tried to hide it. They were in committees and they were not allowing it to go forward. That was really sad. And I'm really enjoying this conversation we're having to the point where I realize I got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I just want people to know a little bit about the life of what happens in your office on a daily basis, just the life of the ACLU. We're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. And we're back. What a great conversation I'm having with Mr. Brickner. And honestly, as it's refreshing to know that people still have their eyes open. They're still paying attention with all of the stuff that's going on in and around us. It's just sometimes mesmerizing. And I think it's a part of Trump's playbook to keep us looking at all the shining objects all over the place and be mesmerized and not really see what is going on. But you're keeping your eyes and y'all staying focused. What does a normal day in the life of ACLU, what does that day look like in the office?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure there are any more normal days right now, but a typical day right now, We have a really strong team. Like I mentioned before, we have about 16 staff, and we oftentimes have team meetings all throughout the day where, different departments may get together, but we also have a lot of interdepartmental meetings where we get our litigators, our legislative folks, our community educators, our communications people all together. Because one of the ways that we've really adapted our work over the years, I started working for the ACLU over 20 years ago. And when I started working, I'm not an attorney. And so the non-attorneys like me essentially went out and put on public education programs. And we didn't really have policy or advocacy staff. We didn't really do a lot in the legislature. A lot of our work was really just filing a lawsuit and then educating the public about it. But one of the things that we realized is that filing a lawsuit and even winning in court does not guarantee our rights. Right. Think about all the things that we've seen where, affirmative action, the Voting Rights Act, all of those things have been chipped away by the U.S. Supreme Court over the last few years. And part of that is because we didn't always have a strong coalition of folks working on all areas, where we were also winning the hearts and minds of the public, in the legislature passing laws to protect those things, right? And so we need to have all of our organization working together to get to where we want to be. So if we want to have a state where every child has an equitable and rigorous education, we have to set that as our goal and then say, what are we going to do to bring our litigators, our communications people, our community organizers, our public policy people, all to work together to get to that place, right? And so oftentimes all of our staff are in these meetings working together, coming up with campaign plans and executing. And so, right now we are extremely busy. We have over a dozen active lawsuits here in the state of Delaware that our litigators are handling on a daily basis. We're in the middle of legislative session, and we're right in the middle of a program we're calling Activate Delaware, where every week we're focusing on a different issue. And we're doing lobby days down in Dover. We're doing action alerts for people to take action on. We're doing calling programs where volunteers can call out to Delawareans to patch them through to their elected officials. And so we're an extremely active group of folks, and it's never a dull day at the ACLU.
Yeah, and it's very evident because, but I love the organization of it. You were able to share and lay out for us that you don't have people who just show up and say, well, my job is to litigate and we just move on. But you have a full wholeness program, as I would label it, where you talked about your community activists, those individuals who will go out there and they're going to not only are we going to win this case, and once we've won it, it's going to inform the community what their rights are, so that people can continue to make sure they're held accountable. That's so important. You mentioned a few minutes ago about Activate Delaware. Help me out, because the person who's watching may not understand. They heard it like I heard it. And what is that? What is that all about?
So what we did was we have planned 4 weeks of action. We called it Activate Delaware. And so each week has a different theme. So first week was immigrants' rights. Second week was voting rights. Then probation reform. And now the next week is going to be gender justice. And so each week looks a little bit different. We have different programs each week for people to tap in, go to a lobby day, be able to meet with their legislator out in their district, to be able to call different volunteers to be able to patch them through to their legislator, or to go to an informational event where they can learn more about the issue. So folks can go onto our website. The last week is going to be this next upcoming week on gender justice, but you can sign up and go to those events. What's really nice, though, is that even if you just go up and sign up for one event or on the email listserv, you get added to our email list where you learn about all the different works that we're doing. So some of the things that I've been really proud of, especially in this new year under the Trump administration, we've done several trainings for activists where we've helped to teach them how to properly advocate for an issue. So how do you run a meeting with a legislator? How do you talk about an issue effectively and persuasively so that you can convince an elected official to come along with you? So we train them on that, and then they get folded into our activist network where they can then go on those meetings. And then we've done a variety of Know Your Rights presentations too, particularly focused on immigrant communities. So we've done a lot of trainings in Spanish and Haitian Creole, but then also a lot of English ones for places like churches or hospitals or schools where people might interact with folks in the immigrant community and they want to learn more about how they can protect other people's rights.
Yeah, where do you find that you put most of your energy? Like, do you find that it's more violations of civil rights in the north part of Delaware or in the south part of Delaware?
So that's a great question. It's been something that I have really actively tried to change in my time at the ACLU of Delaware. When I first came here, a lot of folks would say, we're a statewide organization, but we don't always have presence statewide. It was funny when I first got to the office, we had all of these boxes of old records. So I was looking back at old board lists. And sometimes the furthest south that somebody lived was Newark. We didn't have anybody in Kent or Sussex counties on the board. And so I've really sought to change that. And so I get down to Sussex County multiple times a month. But we actually now have staff based in Sussex and Kent counties.
Excellent.
And so we've started to bridge that divide where now people in the southern part of the state know us a little bit better and are willing to, work with us. Because that's part of it too, is that we only know about the civil liberties violations that get reported to us.
That's right.
If we don't have that community trust with people, then something terrible could happen to someone and we never know about it and we can't challenge it. And so a big piece of what we're doing right now is building relationships up and down the state. I would say, we get complaints from individuals all across the state right now. And so we're, tackling issues, in Seaford and Selbyville, but we're also very active in, Wilmington and Dover and Camden and Smyrna too.
And just because they're major cities doesn't mean they have all the issues. Now you're placing people in all the little places as well.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, one issue that we just tackled recently on immigrants' rights, I'm not sure if folks saw this, was in the small town of Camden. So a couple weeks ago, we usually a few times a week go and check Immigration and Customs Enforcement's website, because on their website, they have a list of all of the local police departments that they have an agreement known as a 287G agreement. And so it's the special agreement where the local police says, we're going to basically work for you, ICE, and we're going to enforce immigration laws. Usually local and state police don't do that, right?
Absolutely.
That's a federal thing. So in Delaware, we had nobody who had signed a 287G agreement. Well, so we happened to be checking the website on a Monday, and we saw that Camden, Delaware, was listed as having a 287G agreement, that they had just signed one. So we start, collecting more information. We find out that Camden actually had a town council meeting that night. So we have a couple of supporters that we said, hey, could you go to that meeting? Because they were residents of Camden. So they went that night. They asked the mayor and city council if this was true. They wouldn't answer them. So the next day, we did an action alert to all of our members. We did a press release, and we sent a letter to Camden saying, you need to take this back. And within 24 hours, so Tuesday afternoon, they rescinded their 287G agreement and pulled out. So, we absolutely watch these small towns because they can have things happen in them that could be severe problems, because these 287G agreements, they're bad for the immigrant community, but they're also bad for anybody who is a person of color, because what it does is it really empowers local law enforcement to utilize even more racial profiling. So anyone who looks like an immigrant is likelier to get pulled over. And so, this could have been really, really bad for anybody driving through the Camden area.
Yeah, which is already a problem. I when you were talking, I was just saying, thank God for the careful eye watch that you all are doing. Y'all are paying attention. You're making sure. And how do I got so many questions in my head right now, just like I'm overloaded. But you all are paying attention. You're making sure that you are fighting the injustice that occurs for the little person, the voiceless person, the person who cannot speak up for themselves. There's a force that comes behind the ACLU, and we are grateful for that. And the reason why I had 1,000 questions from that is it was more of a gratitude moment, that thank you, because we noticed that in some places, people at the heat of the night, or not the heat, at the quiet of the night, they go in and they make decisions, but to know that you all are watching causes some people to maintain their integrity. Mm-hmm. And that happened with the Camden group, where they basically had voted to do something or allowed themselves to do it. And then when they were questioned on it, they wanted to be quiet, and then they rescinded. Mm-hmm. That was a good move, and we're very grateful for that. How do you, and we don't have much more time. Yes, we do. How do you, or how does ACLU, I got it right.
You got it.
How do you all measure y'all success?
It's a great question, because, when we're looking at like these big issues, we're trying to tackle like racial injustice. So how do you determine when racism has stopped, right? Mm. It's, this big issue. And so we oftentimes really have to break down an issue into tiny bites. Because also I know, this work is very long-term. And we can slide back, right? Like I mentioned before, our work on like criminal legal reform, and we have tried to shrink the state prison population. We're about 30% down, but there's no guarantee that 30% will even stay there, right? It could try and creep back up. So we have to, fight against forces that might try and get more people in prison once again. And so we do look at data, right? So, how many people are in state prison? How many people are getting their records expunged? That was another big thing that we did, where we helped pass the Clean Slate Act, which is making record sealing automatic now in the state. So you don't have to apply for record sealing anymore. So how many people are getting that? We can look at, different data, like how much funding schools are getting, and if we're seeing an increase, or we can look at racial disparities and disparities for disabled folks in terms of discipline at school. So there are those firm numbers that we can look at, but we also do judge it with, I think, some subjective information too, right? So for instance, I mentioned like building up in southern Delaware a little bit ago. And so one of the measures of success that I saw was that when Donald Trump was inaugurated into office, the majority of the requests for Know Your Rights programs came from southern Delaware, from the central and western parts. And it was all based off of people that we had built relationships with over the last 5 years. And so for me, that was a really great testament to say, okay, we're starting to be known and recognized in these communities, and that people are starting to trust us, where before they just didn't know who we were. And so for me, that's a really important measure of success too, is just how much people know and trust us and are willing to come to us about these issues.
Wow, excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk about, since you mentioned his name, 47, Donald J. Trump. But I just wondered, and we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about how it has lit up your litigation.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick commercial, and we'll be right back. And we're back. Great conversation. We need more time. I'm going to have to invite you back, and not invite you back to interview you, but invite you back so that you can talk to us about some of the things that you're actively litigating and how the community can help. Because I think the more we can get out, the more people will see that their rights and things of that nature are being protected by individuals who they may not even know. Some people watching the show today probably never even heard of you all, or may have heard of your acronym, but not knowing exactly what you all done. Before we went to the commercial break, I talked about, we want to hear about some of the litigation that you all have done since Trump been in, because I know it's been a lot. But before I do, I think I would do your organization not a good justice if I didn't talk about how are you all funded?
Yeah, so this is a great question. It really goes into, I think, why we can be so effective. So we are funded 100% on private donations.
Okay.
We don't take any sort of government funding from the federal, state, or local governments. And part of the reason for that is because we file lawsuits against the government. That's really our, one of our main core functions. And so for us to take money and then turn around and sue someone, that would be a conflict of interest for us. And so for the ACLU, what I often hear from our coalition partners, what they'll say to us in sort of the back hallways is they're like, oh, you guys are the ones who get to say what we wish we could say out front, because we're always afraid, oh, we could lose our funding or somebody's going to be mad at us.
Especially this vindictive president.
Yeah. And so we have, I think, a little bit of more freedom than a lot of other organizations. And then we can say, it doesn't matter to us whether or not the president or the Congress or the governor or the state legislature or city council or a mayor are angry with us, right? We're going to do what's right and what's best for the people in the community. And that is our only obligation, is to the Constitution and to the rights of the people.
Right. And I think that's wonderful. Now tell me, if I wanted to donate something to your organization, just to say my support, because y'all do a lot of litigation, and you see the staff is growing because the needs are growing. How could one donate to the ACLU?
Yeah, so it's definitely needed more now than ever. We have so much work going on. And so the best thing to do is to go onto our website, aclu-de.org. And if you go there, you're going to see in the top right-hand corner a donate button. Click on there, and you can give directly. One of the nice things about giving to the ACLU of Delaware, or if you give to our national office, that funding gets shared between us and the national office. So if you give through ACLU National, that part of that money is going to come back to Delaware. If you give to Delaware, part of that money goes up to ACLU National. And I say that that's really important because National ACLU then redistributes that money to make sure that we have a strong nationwide network across all 50 states. So if you think about it, there's lots of fundraising that can happen in Northern California, right? People in San Francisco have lots of money and they're giving it to the Northern California affiliate. But if you go to a state like Mississippi or to North Dakota, there aren't a lot of ACLU supporters and there's not a lot of institutional wealth. And so that money from those donors goes to National, and National gives it back out to those small states so that every single state can have a strong staff and can respond to those issues in their communities.
Wow. So all we have to do is go to the website, ACLU DE to say, because you're really talking about ACLU, then it's Delaware, but it is ACLU-DE.org. Okay. And on the right hand corner, you'll see a donate button. You know what color that button is?
It's black.
Okay. You'll see a black button. You push. Is there a limit?
No, you can give
max?
You can give as much as you'd like on there, and there's several different ways that you can give. Right, you can give directly through your credit card online there, but also talks about like maybe you have a gift of stock, or maybe you have an IRA that you want to give through. It talks you through all of those different ways. So again, I think the minimum that you can give is $5 is what they'll take for the web form. But again, as much as you want to give, there's no maximum, and it goes through all the different ways that you can give.
Yeah, I really ask that you would take a moment and donate, because he took the time. You didn't come as a campaign thing, a capital campaign appearance, but hearing all that you all are doing, it's just mesmerizing. So many people have gone to sleep at the wheel. So many politicians have said, I am for something, and then when it comes down to votes, they don't vote for it. There are those who speak out. And it's hard to find Jay Streets in the world where he is a politician, a public servant, but he speaks his truth, and it is what it is, and let the chips fall where they may. But to have you all there makes me sleep better at night. I shared even with my daughter how we have to always give back, regardless of the current state we are in right now. You never know when you're going to need the help, and if you're investing in organizations like yours, you can always have that, I call it credit, to be able to receive and to get help when needed. I'm very grateful for it. It's been 100 plus days. How was your first 100 days with Trump?
It was long. So in the first 100 days, we filed 110 legal actions, so a little bit more than one per day. I will say, while we've been so busy, I also feel so much better prepared this time around than the first time.
Okay.
I worked for the ACLU in Ohio when Trump was elected the first time, and we had done a lot of preparation ahead of that. But I think if you would have gone back in time and asked us in 2016, well, who's probably likely to win? A lot of people were saying, I think Hillary Clinton might pull off this election, and so we didn't take Trump, I think, as seriously as we could have in 2016. And so when he won, we had preparations, but we really had to move quickly into sort of rapid response and sort of pivot from, we think Hillary Clinton might win, to suddenly having Donald Trump in the White House. So this time around, we at the ACLU, I think, were even more planful. So we started meeting a year before the November election nationally with our national office, but also affiliates across the country, where we started planning. And the Delaware folks, we met with all of the other, we call them blue trifecta states, where you have a Democratic governor and then House and Senate, because we all felt like we could really be that firewall for freedom, right? Where, all sorts of bad things can be coming out of the federal government, but we can help to enact state protections to mitigate the damage that the federal government can do. And so that's really what we've been working on a lot here in Delaware. Is even before the November election, we were meeting with statewide elected officials to talk with them about what policies they could put in place to prepare for Donald Trump. And we're continuing to push. We have over a dozen bills in the legislature right now, all on these firewall issues that we are helping to push through now and hopefully get passed. And then we're also, continuing to monitor and support any litigation. So as the Trump administration continues to unleash things in this state, because again, we're only a little bit more than 100 days in. We've got almost 4 years still to go.
Yeah.
There are going to be civil liberties violations in Delaware, and so we're actively monitoring those to potentially file litigation here in the state.
And Trump won when he was 45. Do you find that it was harder? I heard you say one reason why you thought because you didn't prepare for him to win. But do you find that because he had so many professionals around him, do you find that it was harder to really keep a hold on what you were going after, as opposed to now where he has hardly no professionals around him and he's just doing stuff?
Yeah, so I think in the first term, having the professionals around him cut both ways, right?
Okay.
So a lot of the plans oftentimes would be, I think, a little bit more sophisticated.
Right.
But those same people were often the folks who were sort of encouraging him not to go with his worst instincts. And so in this term, I think you are seeing a little bit of more of that spaghetti flung to the wall, right? And he's not being terribly successful thus far. I mean, in federal courts, he has lost the majority.
God for courts,
right?
Because everything else is not holding him accountable.
Right. But he's also being a lot more extreme, right? I mean, we saw with all of the executive orders in the first couple of days where he's trying to do, really legitimately crazy stuff, like try and get rid of birthright citizenship, right? Or, trying to erase DEI out of everything in the government, right? all of these really regressive things that we never saw in the first administration, he's doing because he doesn't really have anybody to hold him back this time. And so for me, this is a really dangerous time because he is trying to break the norms in our country. He is trying to flip the conversation. And I think, a really good example, in fact, is around like police reform. We've been talking all weekend about the legacy of George Floyd's murder 5 years on. And if we think about, we had the racial reckoning in 2020 and 2021, and then a lot of work sort of trail off. But right now, what we're seeing is the federal government now trying to flip all of that on its head. So they just pulled out of police reform consent decrees in Louisville and Minneapolis. They have now taken some of the law firms who bent the knee and said that they were going to provide millions and millions of dollars in pro bono legal assistance. They're now going to be providing that to law enforcement officers accused of disciplinary issues and, race profiling and abusing people. And he has completely gotten rid of the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, where they're really not doing any of this police reform work. And so it's taking us so far back, but also twisting things to say that the work that we tried to do to hold law enforcement accountable, to increase transparency, to care about racial justice was somehow an injustice, and that it is the poor, aggrieved white folks who should be upset. And that is really, I think, a poisonous thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. And I think is really dangerous because, again, if we think about where our mindset as a country was in 2020 versus where it is today in 2025 on those issues, you can see the poison that he's injecting into our society.
Yeah, as we start wrapping up towards the end of this show, and I got to invite you back. Please promise me you'll come back and be with me.
Absolutely.
Some quick questions, and you answer them the best way you can. Do you think Trump will win with Harvard? Harvard.
So I think that Harvard is going to prevail on that stuff. I think that, again, this goes back to Trump is not doing this in a very sophisticated way. Mm-hmm. He is trying to, punish Harvard for not bending the knee to him. And I think when you do something in that obvious of a way, courts are going to see through that and protect Harvard's rights. And, it's funny, I was just listening to an interview with the Harvard president on the drive here. And, we really should think about the impact on Harvard because It's not just, the academic freedom, the ability for them to do their own things, but, moving this $3 billion worth of funding from them. Harvard is one of our premier research institutions. They're doing contracts and work for the federal government. If we take that away, who's doing the cancer research? Who's working on new frontiers in medicine and other science and technology? We have to think about what impact that's going to have then on our country as well.
And I don't think people are paying attention to all the impact that is happening with his crazy decisions.
Well, and with something like Harvard, they hear about Harvard and they're like, I don't like Harvard. I'm not going to Harvard. I'm not sending my kids to Harvard. Why should I care? Yeah. But the reality is we should care because, again, number one, it could impact all of this great research that changes all of our lives, right? It has brought on great medical changes in our country and in our world. But also, if he is allowed to do it with Harvard, where is he going to stop? If you have ever dealt with a bully in your life, if you give the bully the lunch money, he's not going to stop that first day. He's going to come back and he's going to ask for more and more and more and more.
That was a part of my thesis, my dissertation. When I was getting my PhD, I talked about bullying very strongly as I dealt with school violence, because once you give a bully an inch, they take the whole classroom, and you got to confront them. That's one of the reasons why I'm feeling bad about what's going on in Ukraine right now, because he decided he could not just knuckle back. And then when they had that big feud in the office, I said, oh, that's going to be the end. But I believe things are going to turn, and I think things are going to get better. You all have done a phenomenal job with really representing all facets of humanity. I again want to say thank you as pastor of Zion Fair, as a community person who always try to give the voiceless a voice. I'm just impressed. I'm impressed. I want to thank the producer of our show, Sean Coulter, who really he got you here, and I'm honored that I got a chance to sit with you, and I'm glad you said you'll come back, because there are some specific things that are going on in the state of Delaware and in the country that maybe we need to devote a whole show to, so that people can know that people have a right to live. They have certain rights and fundamental rights, and when they are violated, I'm glad to know that you're there to be able to say, look, we will speak up. And that's important, especially for those who don't have the money to get lawyers and things of that nature. You all have been a very great champion. One last time before we leave, how do we donate to your organization?
Yes, so go right to our website. It's www.aclu-de.org. If you go there, that's our homepage. In the top right-hand corner, there's a donate button. Click on there and you can give right there. It'll talk you through multiple different ways that you can give as well if you don't want to just give via credit card.
Great. I'll let you have the last word. Is there anything you would like to share with our audience from your heart? You certainly have this moment.
Well, I want to say thank you to you, Dr. Curry, because again, the only reason that we have, I think, any power in the community is because we do have community partners like you who are committed to educating folks and making sure that positive messages get out about what's happening in our community. And so I appreciate you having this forum. And I just want to say to any of the other Delawareans who are out there, we have gone on probably 100 different speaking engagements since January 20th of this year. And we love going out into the community. And so if you want to have a representative of the ACLU at your church, at your community club, if you at your school, wherever, we're happy to go out there and talk about the issue that's important to your community. We can only do the work that we do because we have advocates who are willing to invite us into their spaces, educate people, and make sure that they know their rights, that they know the ACLU, and that they can let us know about the injustices happening in their community and how we might be able to respond to them.
Great. Mike Brickner, the executive director for this ACLU. Thank you so very much. Thank you. We'll be right back. And we're back. What a great show. Listen, for those of you who are watching, I really think we need to start donating to organizations like this one. ACLU was there for us at Moyer Academy. When the state decided they wanted to be discriminative, even Jay Street saw he was not for charter schools. He was not, but he believed in equity. He believed in people being fair. They were not being fair. They gave us something and took it away, and it just did some crazy political things. But the ACLU joined in and they helped us. I want to say to all of you who are running around and you're at different places and different things are happening in your life, you'll be mesmerized to know how they are giving you the opportunity to continue to live free in the country and the culture that we are currently in. I hope you will take serious. For those of you who have some financial means, give to this organization. He didn't come today asking for money. But I feel compelled to just give an extra push in my final words with you, my final thought. Give to the ACLU, because this is an organization that's there for the little guy, the little gal, the person who has no voice, the person who's trying to just survive in a world that is considered a stew, but always find themselves at the bottom burnt up because the pot is not what I call mixed so that the stew can be equally balanced. You may not understand that analogy right now, but you will certainly understand it when you find yourself not being able to get ahead or to succeed because someone is violating your rights. We have a right to be human beings. And as a human being, we should be able to see certain things, experience certain things without there being discrimination. How come this one can have and that one couldn't? No one one can really talk about the fact that, you were born poor or you were born without this or the other, but we should always treat each other as equals. And that's one of the things I found about the ACLU that is very much there. They're here for you. I hope that you will take the time today to donate to their organization. And I'm going to bring Mike back. I'm going to bring many of them back because I'm really feeling good about there are people who are out there not trying to get a name for themselves, but trying to make sure you have the freedom that you deserve. Until the next time we get together, may the Lord God bless you real good.
Thank you for watching this episode of Coffee with Curry. Tune in next week, Sunday at 11 a.m.